Izaak Walton was my excuse to go to England. I said to the committee at Yale University when I was applying for a fellowship to fish in the footsteps of the 17th century writer, "You know, he's the guy who wrote The Complete Angler, the book that everyone's heard of and nobody's read. It's the third most frequently reprinted book in the English language after the Bible and the works of Shakespeare." I told the committee that Walton's words spoke to me, that fishing was my passion, and that his book defended every facet of the art of angling more lucidly than I could. I lied. At that point, I hadn't even read it. When I'm on the small Connecticut brooks of my youth, I want to be innocent again. I think of sleepouts in thick pine forests, clear running water, garden worms, diminutive flies, and first kisses with a freckle-faced girl. These are my best memories, along with days angling for wild trout. The brook, with all its colors and sounds, is an education. A place where I can learn about myself, and other creatures as well. Without even realizing it, it is in my early years of fishing I began to follow Izaak Walton's first philosophy. Study to be quiet. Shortly after I made my pitch to the fellowship committee to follow in the footsteps of Izaak Walton, my proposal was accepted, and I read The Complete Angler cover to cover. I began to identify with Walton. He was a simple tailor whose genial nature won him the company of kings. I was simple too, a Connecticut Yankee whose intention was to enter the rarefied world of upper-class English society, to fish in the backyards of lords and princes and make them my friends. Fishing was a common bond that would break all boundaries. At Yale, they still have a few first editions of The Complete Angler. The story begins with a conversation between a fisherman, the character Piscator, and the hunter, Venator. The two meet casually as strangers on a holiday and fall into a world very much like a dream while walking along the road to a trout stream, transcending the day and glimpsing, as it were, immortality.
So James, you just told me that you think your interest in trout fishing comes out of a latent predatory impulse in you, which I deeply doubt somehow. As I just remarked, you're the least predatory personality I've ever known.
Yeah, even though my fishing is kind of, the act is quiet and contemplative, I think it comes from an urge to go out and capture and kill, even though now we release most of the fish. Once in a while I relish banging one on the head and eating it, but
eating it, I don't think you relish eating it.
Well, no. Harold Bloom, one of the foremost literary critics in the world, once told us in a Shakespeare class that he had the greatest memory of anyone in the 20th century. So I was a little nervous when I approached him to ask if he knew anyone on campus that could be my advisor for the senior essay. "Well," he said, "I should think no one on the Yale campus knows more about Walton than I do. I'll be your advisor." A few weeks later, I brought him 2 brook trout for dinner. During the course of the evening, I expressed uncertainty as to whether I might be favorably received by the upper classes of Englishmen who own the water where I would be fishing. Bloom remarked, "Nonsense, my dear. You are a writer and a painter. You are classless." I took that to mean that my position transcended class structure, not that I lacked social grace. Prior to leaving for Ireland and England, Harold Bloom gave me a going-away gift, a reading of Yeats's poem, The Song of Wandering Angus. It describes every fisherman's dream, that a trout may turn into a beautiful girl.
I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand and hooked a berry to a thread, and when white moths were on the wing and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossoms in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone and kiss her lips and take her hands and walk among long dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun.
A fishing friend once posed a question to me. "Why do you like to fish?" I answered that I thought it was a good escape from daily life. "I can see that," he agreed. "I feel the same. But if I'm escaping a wife or a job or my screaming kids, what is it that you're escaping?" "Well," I told him, "maybe it's not so much what I'm escaping, but rather what I'm seeking." I was lured to Ireland by promises of perhaps the best native trout fishing in the world. The fabled region is called the Connemara, immortalized in the verses of Yeats. It is also a land where the ritual of trout and mayfly is as much a part of the fabric of the people as wool sweaters and whiskey, where they still practice an ancient fishing method called dapping.
Yeah, you drift with the breeze.
And you put 3 or 4 mayfly on the hook?
Two mayflies.
2 mayfly.
Yeah.
And it's just the wind that carries the line out.
The wind will carry it out. Pull out a bit of line now. And you keep the fly sitting on the water.
So the wind is good because it carries the line
the wind,
out.
no, you have to have breeze for the. You have to have a breeze. So without the breeze, you cannot dap.
Walton would have fished flies this way, with an 18-foot rod of green heartwood, no reel, and a length of braided horsehair line.
That's the mayfly.
The bait is 2 mayflies impaled on a hook, which you make to dance on top of the waves and hope that a trout will take. Dapping is the precursor to fly fishing as we know it. Young schoolboys like Christopher Ford wake early to collect mayflies in wooden boxes that have been passed down through generations. They sell the flies for 50 pence apiece to English noblemen who come to fish the vast lochs of Corrib and Mask. Robbie O'Grady remembers collecting mayflies as a child.
Do you know, the sight of the mayflies, he has a peculiar life to put out differently. He spends 4 years run around the bottom, and then on this particular day he just moves up, and next thing he's no sooner up, and a trout takes him.
The adult mayfly only enjoys a day or 2 of freedom as a winged adult in air before it mates and dies, or is swallowed prematurely by a trout. It is one of the more tragic and beautiful life cycles in nature. The idea of such a small fly attracting a large fish to the surface is part of its mystique.
This is not a lie, this is gospel dying truth. I was out with my dad way back, it would be in about 1947, I'd say, next teen. This break came to the water. And just as he was going to take it, the bloody wind blew it. About a metre further on. So I just pulled the rod back like that, and I left it down. And up he comes, and he went down. I'd say 5, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, never seen him. And it was literally bringing him around like a dog on a chain. And we pulled him from, I'd say, let's say 2 miles anyway. And then all of a sudden he started to run. And he started going, and all of a sudden you could see the line coming up like that. And he went straight up, and he just within the foot of the water, and he went straight down. I hooked that fish at 20 minutes to 4 in the evening. And he broke at 25 minutes to 9. He was that length, he was that tip. I'd say myself between 14, 15 to 16 pounds weight. But I still can see him, imagine, and that's 60 years ago. I can still see him now in my mind's eye, as clear as it was yesterday.
What would Walton's response have been to Robbie O'Grady's story? One of my favorite lines in The Complete Angler. You cannot lose what you never had. And the big trout you got, that was last night?
Yesterday evening about around 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yes, and there we rose another 3 or 4 trout. But sometimes they come up, they see they splash at it, they don't take it at all. Yeah.
At that point I wasn't worried about losing a fish, because I hadn't even hooked one. But that was okay, because a big part of this thing called fishing is getting to spend time with people like old Jimmy Foy, who's been a gilly on Lake Corrib for 60 years. As Walton writes through the voice of Piscator to Venator, no life is so happy and so pleasant as the life of a well-governed angler. For when the lawyer is swallowed up in business and the statesman is preventing or contriving plots, we sit on the cowslip banks, hear the birds sing, and possess ourselves in as much quietness as these silent streams. And if I may be the judge, God never did make a more calm, quiet, innocent recreation than angling. On Loch Mask, I fished with a dear Parisian friend named Pierre Affra, formerly a veterinarian and fly casting champion, now a fishing journalist.
When you grew older, in the beginning you get competition. You want to catch more fish than it, cast a longer line, try to get fish on the other side of the bank, and then you realize that most of the fishing is friendship. You know, the people you met while fishing, some of them get your best friend, you know.
Nice as it is to be out there on the water with friends, catching fish is still the object. Walton writes in The Complete Angler, I envy not him that eats better meat than I do, nor him that is richer or wears better clothes than I do. I envy nobody but him, and him only, that catches more fish than I do. If I was a little late on the mayfly hatch, I was 2 weeks early for salmon fishing. But with all the rain Ireland had seen the previous weeks, the AMFF, a spate river, was flowing at a perfect level. With salmon fishing, lots of patience and persistence and a hopeful nature are required.
Just bring it out across. Yeah, that's perfect now. It's just swinging around lovely there now with the current.
Jim Stafford knows every pool of the AMFF and was kind enough to share his river with me.
Perfect now. That's
Okay.
it. Yeah, lovely. Now, all right. Let's go and do a couple of quick casts down this, just in case there's a fish in this one. Okay. All right?
There weren't many salmon in the river, but Jim hustled me from pool to pool, intent on me catching one.
Just keep moving down. We cover as much ground as possible.
I became impatient. After 2 days with Stafford, I was starting to think that salmon fishing was more about great lunches in the cabin than casting in a 30-mile-per-hour gust pelted by sheets of blowing rain. Then Jim brought us to one last bit of water, what he called the King's Pool.
Whoa, take him easy. Take him into the slack water, James.
Okay.
Yeah, you come in this side here now into the bank.
Okay.
Fish may run away downstream.
Okay.
Come in here. Whoa.
Get up on the bank?
Yeah, do, yeah. Just keep the tension on the rod.
Okay.
Keep the tension on the rod the whole time. Take your time now, take your time. He's on the tail fly. Oh, he's a lovely fish. See him turning in the water now. I think we were just about ready to go home, were we? Huh?
That was definitely the last catch.
Amazing.
I was complaining my
Easy,
brains
easy.
off.
Nice and easy.
I was just about to say
Oh, look at him.
how much I hate salmon fishing.
Well, this is your first Irish Atlantic
My
salmon.
first Irish salmon.
Well done. Right, you got that.
Beautiful fish. That is a splendid fish.
Whoops. Got a sea lice on him. He's just fresh in from the sea, look.
Suddenly I began imagining a man and his sun-freckled face in gray Connemara cloth, climbing up to a place where stone is dark under froth, and the downturn of his wrist when the flies drop into the stream. A man who does not exist, a man who is but a dream, and cried, "Before I am old, I shall have written him one poem, maybe as cold and passionate as the dawn." William Butler Yeats. Don't let the similar language thing fool you, an English friend warned me when I first arrived in London. It is very different from America. He was right. They drove on the wrong side of the street. There were no cars, or telephones for that matter, in Walton's 17th century London, but there were lots of streams, most of them covered by asphalt today. While Walton walked 7 miles one way from his home on Fleet Street to fish the River Lee, I simply took the tube. Fishing journalist Charles Rangeley Wilson knows the streams that Walton might have fished in his day and agreed to show me some of his secrets. We wouldn't cast dry flies upstream for beautiful wild trout. Walton was not a fly fishing purist, and neither am I. In fact, much of The Complete Angler is about angling with worms and cooking your catch. I still enjoy fishing the way I did as a boy, with bait.
Chub, unfortunately. Try and get him away from those barbel. It's a big old bear.
Good job, Charles. Hey, nice fish.
There you go. One chub.
350 years later, it's not likely that Walton would recognize North London. Car dealerships have replaced water meadows, and tenement houses stand where giant chestnut trees once grew. Ooh, that's a big fish.
Some nice barbel in there, it's amazing.
Oh, nice. He ate it, huh? Though nothing like its former self, the River Lee flowed pleasantly on, echoing the refrain of Tennyson's poem, The Brook, narrated by the brook itself.
Yeah, that's good.
For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever.
I'd wash your lips. London River.
Walton was always stopping at pubs to have a few pints with friends. It was nice to know that certain basic natures in man haven't changed. The English Civil War in the 1650s was one of her bloodiest. Oliver Cromwell and his men, the Puritans, led a charge against the monarchy and the Anglican faith. Charles I was beheaded, and the Parliament usurped the monarchy's power. In the midst of this turmoil, Izaak Walton, an Anglican, and a supporter of the king, wrote his little book on fishing.
He was a devout Anglican, and Cromwell's men were out to destroy anything associated with the monarchy and with Anglican faith. And I think most likely that Walton left London to escape the persecution.
Walton fled London and a world that had become so violent and alien to him, and returned to Derbyshire in the Peak District, the area where he was born.
I think one also has to remember that it wasn't just the Civil War. The country had been in threat of Spanish invasion, the Armada and terrorism of various sorts for all his life. And if you said the wrong thing, you were quite likely to get your head chopped off. When Charles II came back, everybody heaved a sigh of relief and wanted as peaceful a time as they could get. People wanted to read about wandering in water meadows and chatting up milkmaids and fishing and so on, and I think he supplied that.
The Complete Angler expressed Walton's feelings about the times and his religious views. One of his first arguments in favor of angling is that the earliest Christians, the apostles, were fishermen. He felt that the same characteristics that make a good angler also make a good Christian. That brothers of the angle were peace-loving, meek, and virtuous men. It is thought that Walton's title, The Complete Angler, was in part code for the Complete Anglican. When I arrived on the River Dove in Derbyshire, several hours northeast from London by car, I could see how this sequestered valley would have been an appropriate refuge from war-torn London. When Walton visited and fished in Dovedale, he stayed with his friend and adopted son, the poet Charles Cotton. Twixt these twin provinces of Britain's shame, the Silver Dove, how pleasant is that name, runs through a vale high-crested cliffs o'ershade, by her fair progress only pleasant made. In this so craggy, ill-contrived a nook of this our little world, this pretty brook, alas, is all the recompense I share for all the intemperances of the air. June 6, I am drenched. I just got off the upper reaches of the Dove. This secluded setting reminds me of a passage in The Complete Angler. Piscator and Venator encounter a milkmaid on the banks of a river and offer her a fish if she will sing them a song. Piscator says after hearing the song by the milkmaid, Queen Elizabeth often wished herself a milkmaid all the month of May, because they are not troubled with fears or cares, but sing sweetly all the day, and sleep securely all the night. The rain made the Dove Valley come alive with verdant smells of every shrub and flower. I felt privileged to be out on the stream alone and away from the hurried pace and traffic of the city.
It is not natural for a man to work in an office and sit at a chair all day long. It's more natural that he works in the fields. There comes a time when you really do need this break from that work. And I found in my life that fishing was relief from that pressure.
Toni Bridget, a retired police officer, is one of the great defenders of Walton's legacy. As a boy, he walked the banks of the Dove, longing to cast a line in waters that Walton once fished. Bridget's devoted his retired life to helping spread Walton's message, keeping the spirit of Walton alive through a museum he helped found in Staffordshire.
I feel when I fish in Dovedale, now, today, that Izaak Walton is looking over my shoulder all the time, and I hope that he approves of what I'm doing.
Here we go again.
Toni took me that morning to fish the River Dove and to see some of the places that Walton and Charles Cotton had frequented. We stopped for lunch, and in the afternoon returned to the Dove, which now lay before our eyes bathed in brilliant light. As we walked, the sun brought the mayflies, and the river came to life. It's a tight spot. Can you get down there, Toni?
Yeah. Can you get him this way a bit?
Yeah. Is it deep down there?
Yeah, pretty deep.
There we go.
Okay. Well done.
Thanks, Toni. Viator Bridge is on the path that leads up the valley to Cotton's family home, and a small stone structure that Cotton built in honor of his dear friend, Izaak Walton. Toni called it the fishing temple.
So Walton and Cotton fished all the way down here.
This whole stretch
Yeah,
up the
they, I mean,
When I asked Toni if he could take me to Cotton's fishing temple, he declined, saying that it was on private property. Bridget, of all people, should have known that I'd come across an ocean to visit this thing, and was not going to leave until I had seen it. When we said goodbye at the end of our fishing, I think he knew what I intended to do. I would trespass, the American way. As far as I knew, they'd stopped beheading people for this offense. There it was, the shrine to all fishermen and the object of my journey. I walked up to it and touched it, looked in through the small glass panes. Over the door I read the words carved in stone, Piscatoribus Sacrum, sacred to fishermen, and the initials of Charles Cotton and Izaak Walton. Then I sat at the edge of the clearing and watched the door to see if it might open. There is no better study of Walton's philosophies in vivid motion than a man I spent some days with on the Stour River in Kent, a Sir John Swire of Selling. He greeted me dressed in three-piece tweeds and a light blue tie. I'm certain he wore a tie every day. This was a picture of Sir John that I had in mind, and I don't think it would be inappropriate to say that a man dressed in sweats and a t-shirt would have been a disappointment. For you cannot have a name like Sir John Swire and greet the world as a couch potato.
The fish rose just there.
Just there?
Yes, I don't know whether he's going to come again.
Right below the willow?
Yes, just under the willow there.
There's something that floats a little better?
I think they're not going to be very particular, I don't think. I think something like that would probably be all right. If we see a splashy rise, I'd change to a mayfly. Do you see where the willow, there's a branch just above, about 6 inches over the top of the water.
Okay.
If you can float it down under that.
I'll try.
I'll give you a very difficult one, you see. It's the great advantage of not fishing yourself, because you don't, no one can criticize you.
Step in here?
That's all right, take the stick.
Sir John spent part of his youth with irons on his legs, a result of meningitis. As a schoolboy, while attending the prestigious public school Eton, he was excused from athletics. Instead, he watched birds and fly fished. Now, as one of the wealthiest men in England, he has remained a student of the outdoors. No, I could probably make a cast in there.
I started fishing for tiny little fish, little gudgeon and things like that, small perch. I'm going to go downstream and see if I can find you an easier one.
Okay.
Right here. And it's rather a pity that nowadays so many people start off insisting on catching great big trout, or some people even their first fish is a salmon. I think it's a great pity if they don't build up catching bigger and bigger fish.
You won't believe it, but I got it.
Did you?
Yeah, we got it, yeah.
Oh, how big was it?
Oh,
Quite a nice fish.
yeah, 12 inches maybe.
Oh, good. Oh, well, that's great.
The English upper class have a reputation for hiding behind their traditions, eccentricities, and clever catchphrases. But I liked Sir John immediately, found him humble and, well, unfull of shit. He obviously had what Walton described as qualities that make a good angler: an inquiring, searching, and observing wit.
I think that was a chub, actually.
Oh, a chub.
Oh! Wow. No, it wasn't a chub, it's a trout. Yeah.
You like that? Why?
That's all right, yeah.
Is there any place to step down here? It looks like it's about 6 feet deep.
It is, it's quite deep. So I was fishing with my father-in-law, and I went right in to land a fish for him,
Yeah.
and all that was left was my hat floating on top of the water. The thing is, the big fish go there, they chase the small ones away. When you catch a big fish there, you come back 2 days later, there's another one there. But
Oh, the next one moves in.
they move in, yes, the next competitor. It's like life, really. I don't think that Walton was the dull old clerical stick that he makes out, because
No.
he had all these very intellectual
Yeah.
men of action friends.
And I think if he was friends with a person like Cotton, who is
Yes, quite.
dynamic and enjoyed
Yes,
having fun and gambling, then he couldn't
Yes.
have been too
they
stiff.
couldn't have been too fundamentalist. I don't think.
Yeah. I didn't feel comfortable telling Sir John outright that I admired him. So instead, I thanked him as graciously as I knew how for his company, his conversation, the rosé wine, the homemade watercress soup, and of course, the fishing. Her garden began to emerge as a passionate creation, and I thought then that the best gardens were like the best books, unexpected beauty in every corner. One might wonder how I found my way into England's exclusive fishing beats.
You see, we've just had the dahlias out. We've only just managed to put them in, but they'll be flowering in August.
Victoria Wakefield of Bramdean is always in the midst of the comings and goings in the Hampshire area. She organized my fishing and social calendar for the duration of my stay.
Come on, Izaak, come on!
Although Victoria does fish, her first passion is her garden behind her house,
I mean, smell that. It really, I think it's the best smell we can possibly have.
where she seems to float about with her dog named Mr. Growler. She said he was a Labradoodle, a cross between a Labrador and a poodle.
And he's very proud. He's just won third prize in dog show.
Wow! I admired Victoria. She kept a social schedule that would tire even the most vigorous personality, but she was happiest with her hands in the soil. Hers was, in Walton's words, idle time not idly spent. Who else went to the Ascot races with dirt under their fingernails? Victoria took me to visit a friend of hers, Roger Harrison, who lived with his family on the River Itchen. When I say on the river, I mean over the river, because the river went under the house. This was my dream house. I've always been enchanted by the idea of living in a house under which a river flowed, where you can hear the music of the water flowing beneath the floorboards. Walton fished this river in the last 30 years of his life. Oh, he took, Do you want the net, Roger?
Yeah, I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Do you want me to try to get him in?
Yeah, if you can. No. think the rest of it. That is a beautiful
That's
fish.
a perfect fish, yeah.
That's it.
Teach him to be more careful next time.
You see where the fish is? He's just on the...
That one up
Yeah,
there? Okay.
that's a good... Well, I think that's just a good one for him.
Roger's water is unique. You can't buy your way onto his 2-mile stretch. Also, unlike the lower beats of the Itchen and Test rivers, where the fish are large and stocked, Roger's stretch has only wild fish.
Whatever it is, it's very small that he's taking.
You think a smaller fly would work?
Well, I don't think I can go much smaller than that. He's going to take it.
Oh my gosh.
You see? You see why the cast is sitting up on the water above?
Yeah, I do see that.
And I think he may have rejected it for that reason.
Because of that. Gosh.
Give him one more and we'll try again. Try a different fly. I try one of these coup de canard. It'll drop down. I think he'll take that.
A nice emerger. Oh yeah, that
ought to catch him.
still a dry fly.
But I don't think I can. Oh look, that's so. He will take it.
He should.
You're
Yeah.
bound to. Little American fly suit you very well.
He's got it. Oh, I don't think he took it, did he?
I think he did.
Did he take it?
I think he took it all right.
I think he's
but
still
he
gonna
isn't
feed.
frightened. He's
Yeah.
not frightened. He took it.
He did take. He opened his mouth.
Definitely opened his mouth.
I'll let him rest for a second.
Yes, that's right. I sometimes think that changing the fly is one of the things that makes it easier to catch the fish because you give the fish a break,
Yeah,
and it
that's
takes a little bit of
very
time.
true.
Been well up to. That's a perfect one. Come on.
Right. Oh.
Take it.
Oh.
You've got him.
Jeez. Oh.
No.
I'm glad he took it though.
You
Thanks,
got him
Roger.
anyway. Well done.
Although we caught a few fish, I know that Roger was secretly pleased that one of his large brown trout had given us such a difficult time, that it had eluded us.
These fish, being wild trout, they're never very easy, and if you get really exasperated with them, the only thing to do is to wait till very late in the evening, and then they can't inspect your fly as carefully as they inspected yours this morning, James.
A few hundred yards downstream of Roger's house, I continued to fish by myself, catching small wild brown trout. Each of them probably descendants of the fish that Walton had caught here. I then spied a young girl watching me from a public footbridge. A milkmaiden, carefree as the girl Walton had written about. My mind drifted back a few centuries, and I thought of asking her to sing me a song. But that was ridiculous. After all, this was just a young girl out for a walk. Then a trout struck my line, and I was taken back to the task at hand. Perfect timing, I thought. I'll get a chance to show off my angling skills, which will provide me an opportunity to say hello. When I turned around, she had disappeared, up the trail, into the hazel wood. And I wondered if I'd even seen her at all. After the first publication of The Complete Angler in 1653, Izaak Walton spent the remaining 30 years of his life in Hampshire, where he died at the age of 90. Today he is buried in Winchester Cathedral. The people had somehow forgotten about him, so they were using the chapel where his gravestone lies as a broom closet. Can you imagine? Over Walton's very grave. The chapel has since been restored. This modest place reflects Walton's simplicity. Says Piscator to Venator, "As for my simplicity, if you mean such simple men that lived in those times when there were fewer lawyers, I say, sir, it is these men that are simply contented and find happiness in a drop of dew. Because they're thankful for what they have, and are not concerned with always getting, catching, and corrupting." In his 90 years, Walton had become familiar with personal tragedy. Besides living through a bloody civil war, he had outlived 2 wives and several children. Disillusioned with his country and times, he found that there are very few things that we ever indeed have. A friend, a lover, or a relative are all mortal. Walton found solace in angling, a safe way in which we can experience failure and learn from it without being irreparably damaged when we lose a fish. In particular, a 4-pound brown trout I might have landed, had I not left the net in the car. On my final day in England, I fed the fish bread on the River Test. The trout had become town pets, and I knew I could fish this river, but I had little desire to cast to them. I felt utterly complacent, and was, in Walton's words, sick of being well. I had a yearning to somehow return to the primitive, to cast a thread and bent safety pin with some bait, preferably worm, in the pond across from my home in Easton, Connecticut.
Clouds go by, I don't want to wait, 'cause I've had an old man's dream, an old man's dream.
This is a fishing world where there are no rules, no dry fly codes. It bothers me when modern-day anglers are critical of Izaak Walton's book because they somehow view his techniques for catching fish as obsolete or immoral. Because he sometimes caught trout with bait. Heaven forbid. Don't you see? The book's not about fishing. It's about life. Or rather, it is about fishing. But fishing is life. Izaak Walton was a self-educated man, a tailor by trade who transcended class structure, befriended intellectuals, and was embraced as a writer of some renown. His little fishing book, filled with recipes, poems, music scores, etchings, and general musings from the heart of a pastoral fantasy, is one of the first works to equate the angling experience with the spiritual. He understood that the immortal quality of rivers held some secret answer to man's plight. How many rivers had he stood over and fished, and how many of his aging faces throughout his charmed and turbulent life stared back at him? Perhaps he understood that the person he saw reflected in the water was not himself, but an ideal, a lifestyle we all envy, and none of us ever really achieve.